guys, welcome to Wickedly Judged, the podcast dedicated to exposing wrongful convictions and fighting for justice reform in America. I'm Rebecca, your host, and if you're new here, this show is for anyone who believes that justice isn't just a verdict. It's a promise, a process, and far too often, a fight. Here at Wickedly Judged, we shine a light on the cracks in our justice system by sharing the real stories, true life of those who have been wrongfully accused, convicted, and forgotten by the courts. We give a voice to their families, advocates, and survivors who refuse to accept injustice as the end of their story. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Veteran Alliance, Yarn Therapy for Me, Justin Apron, Liberty First Radio, NDVLB, Prime Ledger Group, JSIL, and Wickedly Judged Justice Activation Project. And a special thanks to JP Verse of Versefire Records, providing our powerful intro and outro music. Your guys' support fuels our mission. Thank you so much for standing with us in the fight to expose wrongful convictions and demanding true justice in America. This is the final episode in this series, and tonight's episode is personal. Because after talking about the witness contradictions, the investigation, the archived records, the missing weapon, and the appellate process, I think it is important to talk about what wrongful conviction litigation actually does to families. Not politically, not theoretically, real families, real people, real lives. And nationally, we know these losses are enormous. The National Registry of Exonerations reported that by the end of 2025, it had recorded 3,767 exonerations in the United States alone since 1989. Those are only the known exonerations. The registry itself cautions that its numbers are a floor, not the full universe of wrongful convictions, because many cases are never discovered, never litigated successfully, or never officially recognized. That means when we talk about wrongful convictions, we are not talking about a rare headline. We are talking about a documented national problem. And behind every single number is a real person, a family, a life interrupted, a future altered. Because once a conviction happens, the emotional and financial impact does not stop. In many ways, that is when the struggle actually begins. The courtroom may go quiet. The headlines, they will fade. People may assume the case is over. But for the person convicted and for the family that is still fighting, life becomes divided into before and after. Before the conviction ever happened and after the conviction took place. Before the system became something you had to learn, after the system became something you had to survive. Before we close this series, I want to step back and look at everything we've covered. Because honestly, there was a lot of information. This series was never meant to be a simple emotional reaction to a conviction. It was meant to walk listeners step by step through the actual record and the constitutional concerns raised in the motion for leave. In episode 1, we broke down the contradictions surrounding the knife itself. Who possessed it, who controlled it, who disposed of it, and why the missing weapon became so important. According to the record, the witness narrative surrounding the knife repeatedly changed. Some testimony reflected Caleb possessing the knife. Other testimony reflected Johnny allegedly placing the knife into Caleb's hand. Some statements reflected Caleb disposed of the knife. Other materials reflected Billy allegedly admitting he disposed of it himself. And despite all of those contradictions, the alleged weapon itself was never recovered, which means no forensic evidence ever definitively resolved those conflicts. Then in episode 2, we shifted into something even more disturbing: the record itself, the archived proceedings, the previously untranscribed hearings, the recovered recordings, the witness materials, and the realization that earlier review proceedings occurred without many of those materials ever being meaningfully reviewed together. That issue became one of the strongest constitutional concerns raised in the motion for leave. Because meaningful appellate review depends upon meaningful access to the complete record. And when important proceedings remain inaccessible for years, serious due process concerns emerge. In episode 3, we broke down the appellate process, just to give an understanding of how it actually works. The motions, the procedural barriers, the standards of review, the financial devastation, the motions for leave, the post-conviction process, and the reality that many families are forced to teach themselves how the law works simply to continue fighting. Because one of the biggest misconceptions about wrongful conviction litigation is that courts automatically review constitutional issues once they are discovered. That is not reality. Families often spend years simply trying to get courts to review the issues at all. In episode 4, we examined the investigation itself, the speed of the investigation, the witness interviews, the evolving narratives, the interrogation tactics, the forensic limitations, the missing weapon, and the possibility that once investigators settled on a particular theory, later narratives began evolving around that theory. And when all of those issues are viewed together, the bigger constitutional concern becomes impossible to ignore. Not one isolated inconsistency. It's the cumulative effect of conflicting witness narratives, inaccessible records, evolving testimony, interrogation concerns, missing physical evidence, and weak forensic corroboration. That cumulative picture is what ultimately led to the filing of the motion for leave. One of the hardest things for people outside this world to understand is how devastating post-conviction litigation becomes for the families. Everything costs money: transcripts, filings, investigation, expert witnesses, trips, phone calls, emotional weight. The financial damage can be staggering. The National Registry of Exonerations reported that compensation payments and civil awards to exonerees since 1989 have exceeded $5.5 billion. And that number reflects only cases where people were eventually exonerated and compensated. It does not capture the families who spent years fighting and never won. It does not capture the families who could not afford experts. It does not capture the people who gave up because the process became too expensive. And it definitely does not capture the emotional cost. Because there is no invoice for what it does to a family to spend years trying to prove that the system got something wrong. These battles can continue for years or even decades. Families spend years driving to prisons, waiting on phone calls, reading legal documents they never imagined they would have to understand, trying to hold relationships together, trying to survive financially, and trying to keep fighting while emotionally exhausted. And eventually, many families just reach their breaking point. Not because they stop caring, but because the exhaustion becomes unbearable. That reality changes people. It changes how you sleep, how you trust, how you listen, how you look at courtrooms, police reports, transcripts, and legal language. And honestly, it changed me too. I now trust no one, trust nothing, question everything. When I hear somebody was arrested, I want to know what evidence they have, if any at all. When they're convicted, I want to know what the prosecutor's conviction rate is. Was there even a crime committed? Or was this just another one in the belt, a notch on the belt for the prosecutor so that he can get promoted or get a raise or get reelected? I question all of that now. I never did until I started looking into my husband's case. There was a moment during this process that completely changed my life. It happened when I started placing the witness statements, the transcripts, and recovered materials side by side. Not reading them separately, actually comparing them line by line. And the deeper I compared them, the more I realized these were not just tiny little typos or inconsistencies. These were major factual conflicts. Differences involving who possessed the knife, where witnesses were standing, who could actually see the stabbing, who disposed of the weapon, and what happened afterward. And then, when I realized that some proceedings had remained untranscribed for years, and that there were additional investigative materials that remained buried in archives under the victim's name, I understood how incomplete earlier review process may have been. That was the moment that I realized this case was much bigger than I originally understood. And that was the moment I realized I had to learn the legal system myself. Because once you see the record differently, you cannot unsee it. Once you realize critical materials may not have been meaningfully reviewed together, you cannot pretend that does not matter. And once you understand how hard it is for families to even access the materials needed to raise any of these questions, you understand why so many people never take it this far. The Wickedly Judged Justice Activation Project exists because too many families are trying to survive these battles alone. Families are trying to understand records. They're trying to locate transcripts, pay for investigations. They're trying to teach themselves appellate procedure with no legal background. Families are trying to figure out whether contradictions matter, whether new evidence can be raised, whether records exist somewhere they don't know about, and whether anyone will even listen to them. And once I started speaking publicly about these issues, I realized how many people were living the same nightmare that I am. So WJJAP became about more than just my husband's case. It became about advocacy, education, awareness, investigative support, and helping families navigate systems that often feel impossible to understand. Because wrongful convictions do not only affect incarcerated individuals, they affect parents, children, spouses, siblings, friends, communities, everyone who is left trying to carry the weight of the unanswered questions. And people deserve support while navigating those realities. One thing I hope my listeners take away from this series is that justice should never fear scrutiny. Questioning the integrity of a process is not anti-victim. It's not anti-law enforcement. It's not anti-justice. If a conviction is reliable, it should withstand scrutiny. The foundation should be strong enough to uphold the conviction. And when records reveal conflicting testimony, inaccessible materials, evolving narratives, unresolved factual questions, and constitutional concerns, those issues deserve meaningful review. And that belief is not anti-justice. It is the foundation of justice. Because the data shows that wrongful convictions happen far too often. The National Registry of Exonerations has documented thousands of them. The Innocence Project has shown how often DNA exonerations involved eyewitness misidentification, false confessions, and misapplied forensic science. The Bureau of Justice Statistics has shown how narrow and difficult appellate review can be. So when families ask courts to look again, they are not asking the system to abandon justice. They are asking the system to live up to it. Because finality matters. Because accuracy matters. And when a record contains unresolved contradictions, missing evidence, evolving testimony, and constitutional concerns, transparency and accountability should not be treated as a threat. It should be treated as a responsibility. This is why these conversations matter, because transparency matters, due process matters, complete records matter, and because many families never get the opportunity to publicly explain what they discovered while trying to reconstruct these cases. The justice system asks people to trust outcomes, but trust requires transparency, and transparency requires access to the record. If you listen to this entire series, thank you. Because these are not easy conversations by any means. And regardless of where people ultimately stand on this case itself, I hope this series helped people better understand how complicated wrongful conviction litigation becomes, how difficult appellate review can actually be, how inaccessible records affect cases, and how much emotional and financial devastation these battles create for the families. The motion for leave has been filed. The appellate process will continue. And ultimately, the courts will determine how these issues are addressed moving forward. But one thing I will continue to believe is this: truth should withstand scrutiny. And when records themselves reveal unresolved contradictions and constitutional concerns, people have a right to ask the difficult questions. I will never quit fighting for my husband, for your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your brother, sister, niece, nephew, uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa. Never. Because if our justice system cannot uphold the Constitution of the United States, it needs to be reformed. Don't let these stories end just because this episode is over. If you believe in the work that we're doing, here's how you can help us right now. Follow Wickedly Judged wherever you listen to podcasts. Share this episode with someone who cares about truth and accountability. Follow us on social media. Leave a review. It's one of the fastest ways to help more people find these cases. If you happen to share a post on social media, tag us so we can thank you and amplify the conversation. And if you're able to support the mission directly, please donate to help fuel our investigations, advocacy, and education efforts. or support the work by grabbing merchandise at wickedlyjudged.com. Every share, review, donation, and purchase helps us keep pushing for real justice reform. As always, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay hopeful, because nobody deserves to be wickedly judged.